Hello and welcome to the Football Diary podcast, where once again we're looking at the results of the World Cup, and we've come to the end of the round of 16 and a couple of really exciting fixtures. And one big result really stands out in terms of goals, and one stands out in terms of the team that's gone through. So we'll look at Morocco knocking out Spain on penalties, along with Portugal sticking 6 past Switzerland. We'll reflect slightly on Brazil's win against South Korea, although that was definitely to be expected. I'm sure you'll agree. And then we'll think ahead of what's left of this tournament. But Dave, a couple of really exciting round of 16 fixtures, weren't they? Let's start with Portugal, shall we? 6 goals past Switzerland, and that's without Ronaldo. What did you think of the performance?
Yeah, I think it's a slightly unexpected result in terms of the margin of defeat for Switzerland. I think a lot of people probably anticipate it being a lot closer and probably being one of the closer ties of the bunch, really. And I think everyone was kind of a little bit shocked at how easily Switzerland fell apart within the first half. And Portugal, let's be honest, they actually look really impressive without Ronaldo in that team. And perhaps not so surprising when we've already seen him drop from one team this season in club football and the team thrive as a whole. And it's a little bit sad in ways to see it happening, because I just feel as though him as a player, it's never been his mentality that's been an issue. That's what set him apart from other players. His mentality is ridiculous, really, and how defiant he is to succeed and achieve. But you can't stop time. Unfortunately, it does actually impact all of us, and it just looks as though that's how it's kind of panning out, really. He is aging. Even if you look at like last season when he scored 24 goals for United in the season, which it sounds ridiculous when we say that was an under par season considering what he's achieved, in previous years. But even this year now, his movement isn't the same. He did still have that when he kind of lost a couple of yards of pace, which obviously impacted him, but he doesn't seem to be getting on the end of those chances. He doesn't seem to be creating those opportunities for himself where he would, find an extra yard of space in the box and finish the easy chances. He's just not getting them, and that's, I think, really what stands out to me. But you've got to look at the overall performance of this Portugal team. I think, especially the incoming player who obviously replaced Ronaldo, Gonçalo Ramos, who looks a breath of fresh air. His movement and sort of energy really it looked really a completely different outfit altogether. And it's just it's crazy, really, how one player coming into a team can completely change the whole dimension of things. I was really impressed by him. I thought he's finished it.
I think it's more about the absence of a player rather than a player coming in. And I think it says everything that almost 3 minutes of us talking, we'd only mention Ronaldo's name. And he didn't even start this game. It took that long for us to even consider another player, because that's the impact he's had on the game as a whole, but particularly for Portugal over so many years. And you're right, one player shouldn't make all that difference coming into the side. But the freedom of Portugal's entire attacking line seems so different. And actually, you talked about age catching up with Ronaldo. The one thing the rest of the Portugal side has is age on their side, because Gonçalo Ramos, incredibly young, promising forward, who's not really tarnished with the big media presence. He's not really worried about being in the spotlight. He doesn't have the same pressure on him as Ronaldo does. Neither does Rafael Leao or even Bruno Fernandes at this level. So it gave them that spark, didn't it, to go out and express themselves in a way that maybe they can't if they're always looking to feed the same person.
Yeah, and another player I thought was really impressive in this game was João Felix. I just feel as though him as a player, he has so much talent that it's kind of gone under the radar a little bit, especially playing for Atletico Madrid over the last few years, who, let's be honest, aren't the easiest on the eye. So they're probably not going to get the most out of him at club level. But to see it, that's the best I've seen him play for a long while, really.
Yeah,
albeit against a very, very poor Switzerland team. But the way he kind of just made space for himself, was able to kind of attack the space in those areas and really create as well for other players. He looked more like the player that we've hoped he would be all those years ago when he was at Benfica.
Definitely. And actually, his comments after the game, along with his agent's comments, make it very clear that he's not going to be at Atletico Madrid much longer. He's obviously a prized asset in terms of the financial outlay. I think they spent 120 million on João Felix. And you're right, he's playing at a club side where it's not there to nurture his talents, but maybe at Portugal he can. Now, I'm not going to big this up at all. It definitely won't happen. I will mention that yesterday Marco reported that there was one club in the best position possible to sign João Felix right now. Yeah, my boys. How that's being reported, I have no idea. If we see João Felix in an Aston Villa shirt by the end of the season, I don't even know what I'll say on this podcast. But it's inevitable that he will move on, isn't it, Dave? And we'll probably see the best of him at club level, wherever that may be. Maybe at United, replacing Ronaldo?
Oh, there's been murmurs, hasn't there? There's been rumours that he's touted about a move to United in the January transfer window, and whether that materialises or not is another thing, and whether we've got the budget for it is also another thing. And I'd be surprised if it did happen. I think he's a great player. I think he'll be an asset to any team at the top, but finances is going to come into it. Atletico Madrid, I feel like, aren't going to budge on a certain amount just because of how much they did actually pay for him. But I think it's unrealistic to demand that, just because of, I won't say he's been a flop, but he's not certainly performed at the level of a £120 million player. So really they shouldn't really be demanding that sort of sum. And I mean, that's perfectly fair for me. I feel like if clubs are clever enough, they will come in and offer amounts, but it won't be anywhere near sort of the 100 million mark, which that should be the case. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. There's a lot of, obviously, talent in this Portugal team, and there'll be a lot of players that will kind of garner a lot of interest.
Yeah. So let's look at one of them. The first World Cup hat-trick for this year went to Gonçalo Ramos. You started to touch on him earlier and the impact that he had on this side. But what did he bring to Portugal that was so different, and why did Switzerland struggle to hold on to him so much?
I think it was touched on at the start of the game in the first 20 minutes, in that I think it was like chasing lost causes, diagonal balls that were kind of played over the top. Ronaldo doesn't really have the legs for that anymore, and he did offer that. He looked it had an air of sort of naivety to his play, kind of chasing balls that you probably wouldn't get to, or you wouldn't want to be chasing anyway at a later age. And but also making those runs. There was a kind of a variety of sort of like runs that he was making, sort of like diagonals into the channel. He was working into sort of like the wider areas, and he had the energy to then make himself an option in the box to receive those passes, as we saw for a couple of his goals. And I just felt as though he did actually fit their front line a lot better. He was able to kind of rotate, I think, with the players in that front line. We saw him kind of drop deep on a couple of occasions as well, and then have the energy then to burst and make himself an option in the box.
And 3 great goals.
I don't want to keep. Oh yeah, the first one, it's ridiculous, really. Yeah, and I think there was a lot of kind of clamour around saying the defender was probably at fault, shouldn't be letting him get the shot off there, but he had no right to be scoring that goal. That was crazy, really. It wasn't even half chance. He couldn't have got it any more in the corner of the goal, really, with that sort of power on the shot. Was something else. And then, his 2 other goals as well. It's just his instinct as well, just getting across that front post and just flicking it. Probably got a bit fortunate with getting it between the goalkeeper's legs, but you've got to make that opportunity for yourself. And then the third one as well. The finish, was brilliant. He probably got a little bit fortunate with the touch. It was very close to the goalkeeper, but then he had the instinct to just literally clip it over the keeper, and he's just added another 40 million to his price tag, probably.
Yeah, and it was really nice to see that coming into the side, because they have got such amazing attacking talents. Rafael Leao has been a joy to watch this tournament as well. Even if he's had quite a limited role, every time he comes off the bench, he brings something. He brings intensity, he brings energy, and his finish for his goal mean, he didn't have long on the pitch, did he? But he took it well with a massive smile on his face if you see the pictures back as well, which is really nice to see. But Ronaldo wasn't the only big name
Yeah.
out of the squad, or at least out of the lineup in this game. Cancelo didn't start either, but that paid off. Guerrero scored from left back, and Dallo was a great creative force again. I thought played really, really well. So does Cancelo get back into the team for the Morocco game, do you think?
I don't know if it was to kind of offer a bit more of a balance. Dallo this season, although he's not, on the level of Cancelo going forward in an offensive capability, he does offer quite a good balance. He knows when, to sense danger. For United, he's been brilliant defensively this season, and I'm just surprised by his progress in his game. I think he's done really well, and I think maybe the coach thought it was maybe a good time to give him an opportunity against, albeit not, the best Switzerland team, but a fully capable and, competent side that could test them. And he probably just wanted to see what the outlook would be. And I think he came through it really well. I thought Dallo played really well. And maybe sensing a bit of a weakness in that Portugal team is in those wide areas where Cancelo probably can get a little bit over. What's the word?
Over exuberant on his attacking play.
Yeah, over exuberant in those areas and kind of leave themselves open. Maybe against certain sides, it would suit them better to start with Dallo in that area. Yeah. We've seen Cancelo start at right back and left back. And we've seen him do that for both club and country. So there's no reason why they couldn't take Guerrero out as well.
I'd be surprised to see him do that, though. He's been so good for Portugal, hasn't he? He's great from a set play as well. He gets forward incredibly well. He's got a few goals in him, and this one was a great goal as well. He finishes chances like a striker does very often. And having that across your team has really carried Portugal so far.
It's the one area, actually, where they're blessed with a lot of depth and a lot of quality, where I'm sure the likes of Brazil would love a couple of those players in those areas.
Do you know what, though? So Portugal are blessed with quality in every area. I think this is a really good squad that I think a lot of people have been sleeping on because they've been so fixated on Ronaldo. Even football's most loved villain scored in this game. What is he, 38 or 39, Pepe? He's got a goal at the World Cup.
Yeah.
And people seem genuinely happy for him, whereas normally you hate playing against someone like Pepe. It's a great squad, Portugal. I think it looks really strong.
It is, and I know. I think a lot of people are saying they're dark horses, but I don't think they're a dark horse. I just think they're a good team. Like it wouldn't surprise you if they won it and went on and obviously won the competition. There's just so many good teams in there at the minute that it would be a little bit criminal to kind of underestimate some of them.
I think the debate is always going to be, or the conversation will always be, wouldn't we like an Argentina-Portugal final to see Messi and Ronaldo in the final? And people will often say that Argentina are playing for Messi, whereas Portugal play almost despite Ronaldo. But actually, if you take the two of them out of it, there's not even a comparison between those two squads for me. Portugal are far better than Argentina. I think they're actually better than a lot of sides left in the competition. So I think you're right, they could go quite far. On the other side of it, it's worth having a quick word for Switzerland, who you probably don't expect to get much further than this sort of stage of the World Cup. They could have potentially gone through in this sort of game. We've seen them play Portugal quite a lot, it feels like, over recent years in qualifying campaigns, and that's always kind of been their level. Is this a failure for the tournament to go out at this stage, but not just to go out, but in the manner in which they have? You've got to look at that as a pretty bad showing, right?
I think there was just an air of naivety about how they went about it, really. They seemed too open for me. And if you do that against the level of some of these teams, don't get me wrong, they've got some good players in there. I think Briel Mbolo looked really good in this tournament, and he showed those signs of potential in club football as well. I wouldn't surprise me if someone big comes along and picks him up sometime soon. So they've certainly got some of the players, but they don't have as much of the depth and the quality as some of the big guns in the tournament still. So I don't think you can say it's a failure. I think a lot of people are going off of obviously against France when they knocked France out of the Euros. and a lot of people obviously were probably looking back to then and maybe getting their hopes a little bit too high. I think it's a little bit unfair on them there. But yeah, the manner of the defeat, they just were too open in this game. They should have been more cohesive, a little bit more pragmatic in their approach, because they've got the players to hurt them. That Embolo in the first 15-20 minutes before the game was out of sight, actually it looked a real bright spot, and they actually did struggle with him in a couple of transitions. So I think it'd be a bit unfair really to say they've failed, because that even reaching this stage is a pretty good achievement for them.
My favourite thing about Switzerland in this World Cup was a stat that I saw on Twitter the other day, that Xherdan Shaqiri is younger than Kevin De Bruyne. How is that possible? It feels like Shaqiri's been at every World Cup scoring some sort of overhead kick or volley for the last 20 years. So it'd be a shame to see him go. But another team that might have to look at their World Cup as a bit of a failure then has to be Spain. I mean, at the start of the tournament, you talked quite openly, Dave, about how you thought they might lack something going forward. They then went on to score 7 goals in the first game and had us all blushing a little bit. But turns out you had them pegged all along, right?
Yeah, and I saw a stat earlier saying 3,500 passes in the last 4 games, but only 2 goals scored.
It's such a Spain stat, isn't it? That is Spain all over.
But yeah, it was a bit of a false dawn. I think the first game they had against Costa Rica, and I mean, understandably, we did say Costa Rica were probably the worst team in the tournament after the group stage, kind of them and obviously Qatar. Just watching how bad they were in that first game, and I mean, yeah, Spain for me, they are just lacking a couple of players in them attacking areas, just offering a bit more pedigree, a bit more, of a clinical nature about them. And it's just something that they desperately need somebody to come through. Especially, I think, with that we mentioned about the experience, some of the experience in this team. You obviously saw Busquets take a penalty.
Terrible.
It was a bad penalty.
It's awful.
All the penalties were bad.
Yeah.
There was just no conviction in any of those penalties. It was like it was literally walking up to them, and it was almost telegraphed. The keeper seemed to know which way they were all going. Yeah. But they lack some experience in that team. Don't get me wrong, Pedri and Gavi are going to be very, very good players one day, but I just felt like this was probably a little bit too soon for them.
Well, I actually wonder if Enrique got a few things wrong. Now, I really rate Luis Enrique as a coach. I think he's fantastic, and I think he has done some great work at Spain at times. But I looked at the lineup, and Rodri was playing centre-back, Asensio was playing almost like a false 9, Dani Olmo was playing left wing, and you'd argue they just had loads of players where it was square pegs in round holes to try and fit something that just was never going to break the team down. Whereas when Nico Williams came on, for example, that looked like Spain's biggest threat. He was pressing, he was driving at defenders, his pace in behind was working. I wonder if there was a bit of reluctance to trust players that aren't necessarily the traditional Spanish look. Do you know what I mean by that? The way that they play and the style of Pedri and Gavi, for example, they come straight out of the Barcelona academy, the way they pass the ball around. I said to you, that's such a Spain stat. They are players that embody that sort of stat. Whereas they've got some electric players that could go forward. We didn't see enough of the likes of Ferran Torres, for example, I don't think, in this game. We didn't see Nico Williams trusted enough. And actually, that could have got Spain a lot further, couldn't it? Instead of just trusting in Morata off the bench. It's just not an option, is it?
I think you're right with that. I think there are a few players in that team who are quite similar to each other in the way they play. They definitely lacked a lot of directness in their play. And when you mentioned there, Nico Williams came in, it's almost like it kicked them into gear, and they actually did start to create, a few chances. And you've got a question, I suppose, if you're a Spain fan, if he'd have started the game, would they have actually created a little bit more? Because they really did struggle that first sort of half hour of the game. They just looked completely lacking in ideas.
Yeah,
and you've got to credit Morocco. Really, they probably should have won the game in the 90 minutes. It probably shouldn't have gone to extra time, and they had the 2 best chances in the whole game.
Well, that leads me on really nicely to
So
talk about them in their own light, really. I tried very hard not to mention them in the Spain talk because I wanted to give them their own section and credit because they were outstanding, weren't they? And this is a team that we talked about before the start of the tournament that could really hurt teams because they've got some very good individuals, but as a system, they just seem so organised, defensively so sound. They shut Spain out without any difficulty, really. And then eventually their players were the ones who had the ice in the veins to get through that penalty shootout, particularly Hakimi's, we've got to talk about. But Morocco, Dave, have now topped a group with Croatia and Belgium and now knocked out Spain. They've got Portugal in the quarterfinals, which actually, I think that could go either way. We could all of a sudden see Morocco in this semi-final, and then it's anyone's game, right? What do you make of this Morocco side as a whole?
I think there's a contrast of when we were just mentioning Switzerland and how Morocco approached this Spain game. There were two completely different approaches. One very naive and one very clever and meticulous, pragmatic in their approach and how they set up. And I think one thing that stands out to me as well is if you look at Ashraf Hakimi on that side, he had, Ziyech kind of coming back for him and helping out with defensive responsibilities as well, which is quite surprising when you've seen him at Chelsea. He doesn't really offer that sort of support, which he doesn't really need to as much in that Chelsea team because they do dominate a lot of their games. But that stood out to me, and it really kind of showed me that, the manager that's in charge they're really playing for him and really enjoying and relishing.
Quite literally in Ziyech's case, because remember, he wasn't at the African Cup of Nations, and it wasn't until they got a new coach who had that conversation with him that he joined back up with the Moroccan international team. He retired in February. So that's obviously worked out really well. Were there any other in particular individuals that caught your eye? Obviously, Bono will get a lot of the credit, and rightfully so, for his performance in the shootout. But on the pitch during the 90 or 120 minutes, who really stood out for you in the Morocco team?
Yeah, I think Amrabat was one of the other standout players. I just think the energy that they showed throughout this game was kind of epitomised by him, and just the way they got out of the pitch. I just really hope that in the next game they can recover, because I just feel like this is probably taken so much out of them. You just really kind of hope that it's not going to be one step too far for them, where we have seen that happen in tournaments before, that teams have put so much into games and it's kind of really handicapped them going forward.
It's a worrying point when we've just been talking about how much depth Portugal have got, particularly the attacking areas as well, that they're lining up next to each other.
Oh, definitely. But I think one thing that it's definitely going to do for Moroccan football is, can you imagine how many youngsters are watching on and looking at this and thinking, I want to do this for this team? And
more than just Moroccan, though, to be fair, because a lot of Middle Eastern fans have really taken Morocco on as their own team as well. It's been really nice to see, actually.
Yeah, and I think it's worth pointing out as well that how many players do we see? Like, you look at Hakimi, he could have played for Spain. He was born in Spain. A number of other players who were mentioned, Hannibal Mejbri, he could have played for France, he's chose to play for Tunisia and has represented them at this World Cup. You'll see a lot more talent coming through and thinking they've actually got a much better opportunity for playing for, other teams over the globe. Who they can represent. And I think that can only be a good thing, and for healthy competition as well, because how many of these teams, especially the bigger ones at this World Cup, they're just so stacked with talent who don't even get the opportunity to even,
Hakimi is a great example, because to be honest, I think he'd probably be Spain's best player if you put him into that squad. He's an outstanding footballer. He would definitely get minutes there, but clearly wanted to play for his nation, and now is leading them into the quarterfinals of the World Cup. It's worked out really well for him. His penalty, Dave, you've got to have some nerve to be able to do that, haven't you? I mean, in fairness, you've got a second. If he misses, there's a second chance for Morocco to win after him. So maybe the pressure's off him a little bit. But my word, it was nice to watch, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's your heart's in your mouth, isn't it, when you're watching it, and you're just hoping the goalkeeper, when that happens, the goalkeeper's not just going to stand down the middle, and you just, it's almost kind of cringe-worthy when that happens, and you really almost kind of want to dig a hole for them and Bury
It's
yourself in
difficult.
it, really.
Yeah. Okay, so these two sides that we've talked about then will obviously meet in the quarterfinals. Portugal against Morocco. Who wins, Dave?
Your heart says Morocco, but my head says Portugal.
Mine too.
I just feel as though they've just got too much talent, and going off of how they did play this last game as well, I just think that they can only go from strength to strength from it. Can you imagine how much momentum they're carrying forward as well? This Portugal team, the team spirit, there seems to be a lot of unity about them as well. So they're going to be strong favourites, but who knows? We've had some crazy games in this World Cup.
We have.
You can't really rule out Morocco. They've definitely got a lot of talent in there, as well as that fighting spirit which they've showed.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you want to know anything more about Morocco, obviously we did our World Cup previews before the tournament started, in which I did say Morocco would be the best African side at the tournament, and here they are in the quarterfinals. So go back and check that out if you want to have a look, along with our other teams. The team that a lot of us predicted to win the whole tournament continue on as well. Brazil knocked out South Korea with a 4-1 win. Another lovely Richarlison goal in the middle of that as well. Neymar back in the starting lineup, scoring as well. Vinicius gets a goal. A great all round performance from Brazil again, Dave. Is there any stopping them?
It didn't really. I know this sounds really kind of pessimistic, but it didn't really tell me anything that I didn't already know about this team.
Okay.
And I think a lot of that was, like, no disrespect to South Korea, but they're not on the level of some of the other teams in this tournament. And when Brazil do face a high caliber of opponent, I think it's just going to be a completely different game. And it also opens up Brazil's vulnerabilities, where I feel are in those wide areas. And they have the attacking players that, for me, don't offer enough defensive kind of cover to their fullbacks. So it's going to be an interesting one, and no doubt a very entertaining game, obviously, in the next round for Brazil. And
do you know what though? You say about we'll see Brazil when they come up against a better side. I don't really know when that is. That might not be all the way to the final, because they've got Croatia in the next game, who really have flattered to deceive and are quite fortunate to be where they are. Then they'll play either Argentina or the Netherlands, both of which, again, I think have got their downfalls quite comfortably. Neither of them look the complete package. It will be their biggest test so far, don't get me wrong. But Brazil might find themselves just happen to be in the final based on who they're playing, really. And then that's when they get their first test, don't you think?
I mean, they're quite fortunate. I think they're on the favourable side of the draw for me, because, either whoever gets through out of England and France, you've then got potentially Morocco or Portugal facing, which is not going to be an easy game at all. If you were a side from each side of the draw, you'd probably say you'd rather be in Brazil's position, and that's no disrespect to the teams that are in over there, but
why not disrespect them, Dave?
You've got to say that England and France are that's worthy of a final. That game itself is, is going to be the world's going to be watching that one for sure. And I think Brazil will be looking, really, this is an opportunity they should be making the final where they're looking at now. And the pressure's on them, really, to be kind of consolidating that place.
Okay, so we've looked at all of the round of 16 games now, Dave, and actually the tournament's not got long left. There's 8 games left. There's the 4 quarterfinals, 2 semi-finals, the third versus fourth playoff, which I know is your favourite game, Dave, and the final to come. So now we've only got 8 games left. I'm going to ask you a few quick fire questions. Let's give me some answers on, first of all, who's getting through each of our quarterfinals. So Argentina, Netherlands, who's going through?
I'm going to say Argentina. Argentina.
Okay, and they'll meet who in the semi-finals, Brazil or Croatia?
Brazil.
Yeah, no hesitation for that one. Then we've obviously got Portugal, Morocco. We said we think Portugal are going through on that one, right?
Yeah,
and they're playing England in the semi-finals?
I'm going to say England. And
yes, Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to say England, and I just worth saying as well. Those two semi-finals are, if that happens, that will be
Amazing.
crazy. Like it couldn't be any better really if that shapes up like that as well, and especially the kind of history that England and Portugal do have with each other.
Yeah. And
Over
you
the
know
last
what?
few years, over the last, yeah.
If England knock France out, they'll win the whole thing. I honestly believe that will give them the kick they need to go on and get it done. It'll either be all or nothing. We'll get knocked out in the quarters, or we'll go all the way. I can't see us losing to Portugal in the semi-final. Brazil would be a test, but I think they could do it. I honestly think they could do it. Who's getting through to the final out of those four teams then, Dave? Two teams.
My heart says England and Brazil.
Yeah.
But my head says France and Brazil.
You just said France aren't even getting through the quarters. Sol Campbell saying that he thought the best
I
team
know,
France
but
and Brazil would be
I went with
Belgium.
my head on the second. I went my head with the second answer. My heart was with the first answer.
Brilliant. Okay. Okay, so a couple more things to kind of clear up. There's always one player, isn't there? There's the James Rodriguez of the tournament, where all of a sudden they are rocketed to the top of the world stage. Have we got a player like that in this tournament so far?
I think there's been a couple of individuals. I don't think there's been an outstanding individual for me, and it's going to be a couple of gems that come out, maybe unearthed, already known to be quite talented. One of them's Enzo Fernandez for Argentina. I feel as though he's looked brilliant for them every time he's come on. He should be a fixture in that first 11 for me. I think he just offers so much more in that midfield than what a couple of their other players do. And the other one, which we obviously saw last night, is Gonçalo Ramos. I think there's no better way of kind of announcing yourself on the biggest stage in the world, really, is there? I thought the way he performed in that game, in his first start as well, his first competitive start in a World Cup game, was unbelievable.
What
about you?
Is Bellingham too big a profile already to be put into this bracket? That's the only other one that you might go.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was obviously well known before this, but I feel like since this tournament's began, it's kind of, he's been highlighted as a player from, people all around the world, really. It's been noticed. I think, hasn't the PSG chairman spoke about him in the last year, hasn't he, as well, saying that, everyone's interested in him, everyone wants to sign Jude Bellingham, which, they should. So, the amount of publicity he's getting now is astounding, and it's just hoping that he can just progress in the way that he is.
Yeah, him and Musiala have both been fantastic in this tournament. It was a shame that we lost Musiala so quickly in it, because otherwise it would have been nice to see those two really show what the youth can do in this tournament. Last one I'll ask you then. Mbappe's on 5 goals. You've got, Saka's on 3. Is Messi on 3 as well, I think? There's a few players around. Ramos is now on 3. Where's a golden boot going to end up? Are we seeing Mbappe just running away with it? Or if England knock him out, then hopefully not, right?
I'm going to say Marcus Rashford's going to come out and score 4 or 5 goals in this last 3 games.
If he does, if Rashford wins the golden boot and England win the World Cup, I'll take that all day. Well, I don't know how much me and Dave have proved as predictors for this tournament off the back of that. But if you do want to see more of what's going on in the tournament and more of our opinions, please do like and subscribe to the channel. You'll be able to see much more content through the rest of the tournament. There's only 8 games left, but we'll be here to talk you through all of them and hopefully celebrate England's victories or cry in each other's arms when we get knocked out inevitably on Saturday. We'll see. But for now, we'll say it's coming home, and we'll ask you again, support us on all platforms, please. We're on Instagram, Twitter, everywhere that you would want to find us. Of course, TikTok and YouTube. So thank you for your support so far, and thank you, Dave, for joining me today.
Pleasure.
We'll see you again when England are semi-finalists, right?
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.